Diane for bringing me here today. And I feel it's a real honor to be here for the 12th anniversary of Vines. And so I'm honored to be here. Thank you for having me. I'd like to just start off by playing the harp a little bit, and I can kind of roam a little bit. So I'm just going to kind of wander around and give you all a little experience of the harp. This is a new instrument that I recently got in the last couple of months. Maybe you can see it's a double-strung harp. There's 2 sets of strings, so you have to be even more incredibly talented to play this harp. When I first got this harp, I wasn't sure if I liked it because I had to learn a new technique of playing and kind of make some new connections in my neural circuitry in order to do it. But now I love it. It's got a really warm, sweet voice. It's one of my new best friends. So I'm just going to wander just for a few minutes and play a little bit for you. speak for a while, then I'll play a little bit. Just stay in the energy, because so much about what I want to share with you is about the energy. And so much about tuning in to the more subtle realms, the more ethereal realms, the more transcendent realms. It's about a feeling and a higher frequency of light and sound. So it's really about attuning ourselves and sensitizing our perceptual faculties, like our sight, our vision, and our hearing, and our sense of touch, feeling, smell. All the senses can go to a higher level of sensing. So it's a journey that I've been on. I want to share a bit about it with you. And I have some pictures I'll show at some point as well. When Diane gave my introduction via the email and the mailing, she said that the way that I contacted the hereafter was not in a traditional sense of a near-death experience. I chose a different route. And normally in my public talks, I don't really talk about this so much. It's been a very personal experience. Well, my life from the very beginning, I seem to have been experiencing alternate realities even as a young child. And at 10 years old, I was diagnosed with hyperactivity disorder. My parents were concerned because I wasn't getting good grades in school, yet when they tested me in the intelligence test in the state of California, I scored in the top 10% of all the children in California, yet I was getting D's in school. I wasn't studying. So they sent me to a psychologist and they diagnosed me with hyperactivity disorder. And of course they put me on Ritalin, which is a very powerful psychotropic drug. And that had a very negative effect on me. Basically what it was doing was like they gave me LSD. And I started to, when I was high on the Ritalin, I started to leave my body. It started when I would be at home watching television, and all of a sudden I would be catapulted out of my body and sucked into some sort of other dimension, and the TV would look all of a sudden like it was at the end of a football field, 100 yards away, and I was looking through a long tube. And when this would happen, my body would be completely paralyzed. I couldn't move. And it was terrifying. And I took all my will to come back, to be present again. And this would happen uncontrollably, and it would happen when I was in school. I would be sitting in classroom and I would daydream, look out the window, all of a sudden I would fly right out of my body, right out the window. And it was very real. And then it also triggered a series of nightmares that started to happen to me. I would wake up in the middle of the night and I would be running through the house like a sleepwalker, but sleep running. And I would be terrified, and there was something coming after me. And I would end up diving into my mother's bed, shivering and shaking, and that was the only way. And this went on for some time, for many months. But then I just realized, I'd have to go to the nurse's office in the afternoon to take my pill. And I'd go in there, and there'd be all these other really strange kids. And I said, I'm not like this, I don't have a problem. So for a while I started putting the pill under my tongue, like Jack Nicholson did in The Cuckoo's Nest. And then when I got out, I would spit it out. And I did this for a few weeks, but then I just got tired of doing that, so I went home to my mother and I said, I'm not taking that pill anymore. And she agreed with me. She said, okay, because she was concerned what was happening with me as well. And as soon as I stopped taking it, the nightmares cleared up, and I wasn't so much catapulted out of my body. But it got me used to being in kind of altered states of reality. And simultaneous to that, my grandmother was my caretaker a lot of the time. And she was a mystic. And there was somebody earlier here today who spoke of Eckankar. Who was that who spoke of Eckankar earlier? You here? Yeah. My grandmother in Eckankar was a fifth initiate, or known as a modest. So she was very high in the teachings of Eckankar. Eckankar is the ancient science of soul travel. And so she started teaching me as a young boy. She would whisper things into my ear, and she would tuck me in at night. And then when I became, she would always say, Peter, listen to your inner voice. Listen to your inner voice. Listen to your inner voice. Growing up with her as a young boy, and out through my whole life, actually. And when I turned about 15 and I started going through puberty and becoming a man, that's when she started giving me books. And so I started studying the techniques of soul travel at 15. Simultaneous, I was reading the teachings of Carlos Castaneda, the books of Carlos Castaneda. As you mentioned earlier, I was in 10th grade, and I didn't like school very much. I would rather be out on my skateboard or my surfboard. And I took a class that was library, where I could just cruise for one period, go in the library, peruse the books, but I'd have to stack the books. And this one day I was in the row of books, nobody there. I was putting books away, and all of a sudden up ahead of me, a book fell out on the floor. And there was nobody around. And I went up and I looked at it, and it had a beautiful cover on it with all these colors, and it was like a desert scene, and there was this big butterfly on the cover. And it said Journey to Ixalan, Carlos Castaneda, and I was like, wow, it was Tales of Power, is what it was, Tales of Power. And I read the back, and it sounded really interesting, so I started reading it, and I couldn't put it down. And then when I got to the end of the book, I realized it was a whole series of books. So then I went back and I read the whole series of books. And that really kind of introduced me to kind of a shamanic perspective about life and the spirit and all sorts of energy. And so it seemed like I had a destiny to be a soul traveler. And then also working with the techniques of Eckankar, they teach you how to leave your body at will. And I became pretty good at that in my meditation. My grandmother would tell me incredible stories of traveling in the etheric planes into the causal plane and going to these golden temples of wisdom and studying with other Shailas or students who were there and being with the ascended masters in the higher planes. And I was just fascinated by all this stuff. I wanted to have that experience. And she also told me that she would just be hearing the angels' music constantly in her ear. And that was intriguing to me as well. So my journey progressed, and I became older, and I ended up dropping out of college. And I wanted to fulfill a childhood dream of being a ski bum. So I left Los Angeles. I grew up in Southern California, and I moved to Colorado. I ended up in Aspen. And my year off from college turned into 10 years of skiing. I became a ski instructor, an avid outdoorsman. And also while I was there, I worked with John Denver. And I worked with him at the Windstar Foundation, which was an environmental education research facility on the outskirts of town, where they did a lot of things like sustainable agriculture and human potential work, all sorts of workshops. And I ended up linking with his partner, Tom Crum, who is a black belt in Aikido and has published several books and teaches all over the world. And he started training me, and I became one of his students, and then I became one of his assistants, where I co-facilitated in his workshops with him. And so by this time I was 23 when I started working with him, and at his workshops, people from all over the world would come, and executives from Fortune 500 companies, doctors, attorneys, all sorts of interesting people, and they would come to learn about the body-mind principles and how to meditate and how to tap into energy. So here I was 23, and I was teaching meditation and these techniques to much older people who were very successful in life. But then my time in Aspen was coming to an end, and what I like to do is I used to go to the top of Aspen Mountain and ski out the backside to this place where I could look at the view, and I could look out over the whole Rocky Mountains. And it was there where I would have my conversations with God, so to speak, and I could hear my inner voice very clearly. And this one day when I was up there, I sensed that my time in Aspen was coming to an end. I'd been there 10 years, and the thrill was gone, so to speak. I knew there was something new coming for me. And this one day I was up there and listening to my inner voice, and I heard a voice speak to me, and it said, "Go to Sedona." And at the time I didn't know much about Sedona. I had heard rumors and stories about this spiritual Mecca in the southwest of the United States. And this was just after the harmonic convergence, which was in 1987. I don't know if any of you remember that. About 5,000 people came to Sedona at the time and were on all the vortexes and meditating and doing all sorts of things, and the place really got activated, and it was right after that where I heard the call that I should go there. So I decided to take a trip. And let me backtrack just a little bit. After I got that message, within a week I met a man in Aspen, and it turned out that he owned a house in Sedona, a little cabin on Oak Creek, and it happened to be empty. And he said, "Why don't you go stay in my place?" And I was like, wow, I was just thinking of going there. This is how the synchronicities started to happen.
Sure.
And so I went to his place, and when I came down from Flagstaff for the first time and drove down to Oak Creek Canyon, I was just struck by the beauty and the majesty of the red rocks there. But also there was a feeling of familiarity to it, of home. And I almost knew instantaneously that I was going to end up in Sedona. But I spent a few days there, and I'm cruising around the town, exploring the backcountry there, hiking the trails. And I met the most unusual people, very spiritual, mystical, cosmic people that I had never met before, and it seemed like they were all converging in Sedona. So I just totally fell in love with the place immediately, and I went back to Colorado, and I packed my stuff, got my life together, and within about 2 months I made the move down to Sedona. And my life began to change very rapidly again, because Sedona is really, how many people have been to Sedona? Yeah, so you know what I'm talking about. It's really about the energy, isn't it? The vibration. The rocks have this very strong vibration, and so I went into another phase of inner work and really sensitizing myself to subtle vibrations again. And I love to take crystals, quartz crystals, and hike way out into the wilderness and sit and meditate and just tune into the energy. And after about a year of being there, I got another message from my inner voice, and it told me that I should release all my material possessions, and that I should get a Volkswagen van, because I was going on a walkabout, on a vision quest, and I needed to be completely self-sufficient. So I did that. I trusted this inner guidance that I was hearing, and I released most of my material possession, even old photo albums that had documented my life thus far. Because at the same time, I was still reading Carlos Castaneda, and Castaneda Don Juan talked a lot about erasing personal history. So that's what I did. I wanted to be a shaman. And I knew that I felt that I was going through a rebirth. I felt there was something within me that wanted to come out. And I was going to do anything I could to discover what that was. I'm sure maybe some of you in this room, or most of us, had a feeling that there was something inside of you that wanted to come out. Maybe you always wanted to be an artist, or play music, or whatever it was. But a lot of times we are afraid to really take the first step, or to sacrifice our comfort zone to break free, to get out of the box, to live our life of passion and really follow our joy, or follow our bliss. But for me, this feeling had been there for a long time, and I knew this was my time to discover what it was. So I did get that Volkswagen van, and I didn't know how long I would be living in it, but I slept every night out in the canyons, in the forest, and amongst the coyotes and the scorpions and the tarantulas and the Indian ruins and all the spirits out there, and the UFOs and everything. My time living in my car turned into 3 years. I lived in my car. And it wasn't always easy, but it was very fruitful. What I discovered of being in the wilderness there was that there was the most profound serenity and silence there that I had never quite experienced. It was a palpable energy of serenity and tranquility there. And so silent and quiet that I just loved to hike out into the canyons, just find a special place to sit and meditate, and just be in the silence, and just close my eyes and meditate, and tune in to the silence. It's what I call the roaring silence, because once you tune into it, you find that it's full of sound. Yeah. So, simultaneous to as I was doing this, I had an experience where I met somebody who came into my life who had an extraordinary, sacred chemical ally, so to speak, a substance that if you were to take this substance, you could cross over to the other side for a short time and come back. Now, when I met this person, I had actually read about this particular substance in the books of Dr. John Lilly, who was the pioneer in interspecies communications with the dolphins. He was the one that created the isolation tank, the flotation tank that was dramatized in the movie Altered States with William Hurt. Did you see that movie? Yeah. And so I was really fascinated by Dr. Lilly's accounts in his books of doing this substance and then leaving his body and going into these other dimensions and meeting angelic beings and extraterrestrials and going on spaceships and all sorts of wild stuff. And at first I was really hesitant to do it, but because of synchronicity, it was shown very clearly that I was to have this experience. But the way that I had to connect actually with it was that I needed to go to the Hopi Indian Reservation.
Mm-hmm.
So I made a trip up there. It was in the springtime, and the Hopi Indians, they do the Kachina dances up on the mesas every spring. They do. During the wintertime, the Kachinas are in their dormant state, living in the mountain, in the sacred mountain, which is the Kachina Peaks in Flagstaff, which is a volcano. But then in the spring, they reemerge. And so these were the first dances of the springtime. And so I went there with a friend who had access to these dances, and I got to go to the first mesa, which is, they don't even allow white people there, but we got to go there. And it was there where I reconnected with a veterinarian who was the one that supplied us with this sacred substance. Because nowadays you can only get it from veterinarians. It's called ketamine, by the way. And ketamine. It's in popular terms, it's known as vitamin K or special K. It's getting a lot of publicity now because it's very popular with the younger kids who are doing it at the discos, of all places, and the clubs and dancing at rave parties, which I couldn't imagine doing. You can even go on YouTube and see videos of young kids doing this stuff and like having these wild experiences. It's a shame, actually, because I feel like they could damage themselves. But when it came to me, it came in a very reverent, very spiritual and sacred way. And it was for me to discover something that was within. And so we ended up getting some of this stuff and came back to Sedona. And then I had my first experience with this stuff. And it was the first time I did it, I didn't do very much. I was hesitant, so I just did a little bit, just to have a little bit of an experience. And basically the way you do this is it's a liquid form, and it's injectable. It's anesthesia is what it is. And it's the safest anesthesia there is available. And it's been thoroughly tested, but they don't use it in this country anymore because when they would give it to people for surgery, they would come back and tell the doctors that they floated out of their body, that they saw deceased loved ones, they saw Christ, they went on spaceships, they saw angels, and the doctors didn't know how to deal with this. They thought it was some sort of psychosis. And they were very uncomfortable with that, so they stopped giving it to people, unfortunately. But for me, it came for me so that I could make this inner discovery. I met a woman in Sedona shortly thereafter who became my girlfriend. Actually, the first time I met her, she was teaching a meditation yoga class that I went to. And after the class, we struck up a conversation. There was a real rapport with us. And I told her that through conversation that I had some of this unique substance, and she was very interested in it. So I invited her back to my art studio that I had at the time. I was still living in my van, but I had a little art studio in town where I was doing my stained glass, which I'll show you pictures of. And the first night we met, we did an experience together. And we sat down, and I injected her with a small dose and myself. And we had a simultaneous experience of traveling into another dimension and going actually underwater to like some underwater temples, like very Atlantean kind of scene. It was really very psychedelic and very unusual. And when we came back from that experience, we just knew that we were supposed to work with this stuff together. So for the several months after that, we met, and we became boyfriend and girlfriend. And every Sunday night, we would meet at her house, which was on the outskirts of Sedona, and we would do our experiments. And we would create a sacred space in this bedroom. And before we'd always do it, we would always do a lot of prayer. And I would always call forth the highest power I knew at the time, which was Christ. I would always ask Jesus to come to be my guide. I didn't know anything about the angels. I had no angel experience really at that point. But I would always ask for divine protection as I would journey forth into the other realms. And the way we did it is we would go one at a time, and we would do it sensory deprivatives, where we would put earplugs in and be in a completely blacked out room in the total darkness. And go one at a time, and the one person would watch over the other person. And it lasted about 45 minutes. But eventually what happened was, as we increased the dosage, and I got more comfortable with it, I had a full death experience where I completely left my body. Basically what it was like when after you inject this stuff, you lay down and you feel kind of a warm, tingly sensation on your extremities. It takes about 2 minutes. And then all of a sudden it moves over you like a wave. And basically for me, because I was already kind of familiar with getting out of my body, the way I describe it is I would do a very graceful backward somersault right out the top of my head. I would just go right out my crown chakra. And I would do a kind of a graceful backward swan dive double flip. And then all of a sudden I would be in a completely other dimension. And then I would be floating above my body, and I would look back on myself, and I was like, wow, what's happening here? And I would go actually through the roof and be above the house and above the whole town. And basically I thought I had died. I was out there and I was going, oh great, Peter, you just shot yourself with drugs and you killed yourself. That's really smart. And but then I would be so free, and I would fly around in the cosmos. I would be out surrounded by stars, and I would travel through the solar system, and it was quite extraordinary. And then I would come back. About 45 minutes later, I'd feel this little tug on my silver cord, and it would pull me back into my body and pop right back in my body after about 45 minutes. And it was extraordinary. Well, I kept increasing the dosage. And one of the next times I did it, I went out of my body again, and sure enough, I had that same conversation with myself. Oh great, you killed yourself again. And but as I looked up ahead, I saw this brilliant white light. There was all of a sudden this brilliant sphere of radiant light. And then I would look back at my body on Earth, and then I would look up at this radiant sphere of light, which I describe as like a sun, but it had the light of 1,000 suns. And the emanation from this golden light coming off the sphere of light was like divine love. Just like what Diane talks about, fluffy love. It was just full of this palpable sensation of ecstasy and bliss. I'd never experienced anything like it. So I had to make a decision. I'm either going to go back to my body on Earth, where I was kind of living in my van and struggling financially, or else I could go into the light. So I decided to go into the light. And I just looked at the light, and with all my will and intention, I just went for it like a moth to the flame. And I just flew right into it. Because when you're out of your body like that, you think and you go. It's instantaneous. So I just flew into the light, like at the speed of light. And I just went right into the center of that radiant sphere of light, and I just dissolved into it. I describe it as like I exploded into 1,000,000 pieces. And any sense of my own ego or my own sense of self was completely dissolved as I merged with this radiant sphere of light and source of love. And that lasted for, I don't know, it was a timeless sensation. But then eventually I came back from that, and then I came back into my body again. And this period of time, I was not very grounded. I was spending a lot more time out of my body than I was really in it. But I was able to repeat this experience time and time again. I probably did it about 50 times. So I had this death experience many, many, many times. And it actually got easier the more times I did it. I got more familiar with the mechanics of how it worked. Eventually what happened was, when I got out there, this one time I got out there and there were these angels there. I sensed there were some energy beings around me. I couldn't see them at first. I could see some faint silhouettes of some light beings around me. But then as I adjusted my inner vision focus, because when you're in that other realm, you're looking with your third eye. You're not looking with your physical eyes. So, and I had to learn how to really see, to become a seer, see beyond the veil, so to speak. And as I did this, I adjusted my inner vision focus, and all of a sudden distinct forms started to take shape. And to my astonishment, I discovered that I was surrounded by angels around me. And the first ones that I encountered were the cherubs. And they were playing harps and flutes and violins. And I was just like, what? I couldn't believe what I was seeing, because to me I thought angels were just, a fantasy. But all of a sudden I was having a direct experience of them. And, this glorious music was happening as well. Sharing the story, I'm trying to put it into a linear sequence, but it was very non-linear. So as I was having these experiences, after it was over, I would retreat back into the forest. I would just be in the silence and the serenity of nature. And I would meditate and do my yoga, and I was doing some fasting and cleansing. And what I discovered was that when I would sit in the silence of the canyons, I would start to hear the music, the heavenly music, and the angel would be singing to me. And then at night, and we would do these experiences in the evening, and I would come back in the forest, going back and forth. So I was living in kind of a multi-dimensional reality, where I was having a very physical experience in my body, but at the same time, I was very open to these other realms. It was very unnerving at times. It took a lot to keep myself together. It was on the edge experience. I thought for a while I was losing my mind. I didn't have a lot of people that I could share these stories with. But I had one good friend who actually was very close to me, and I was sharing what was happening, and he kind of took care of me. He'd give me money so that I could keep doing it, and he let me bathe at his house and make food in his kitchen, and he kept encouraging me, keep going, keep going, keep going. Well, eventually what happened was, when I got out there with these angels, I discovered that I could communicate to them. I was out there, and they were around me, and all of a sudden I could hear their thoughts. I could hear what they were thinking. And they were saying, boy, look at him. Do you think he can see us? I was just like, whoa. And then I said in my mind, I said, yes, I can see you. I said, can you see me? And telepathically, they said, yes, we can see you. I said, can you hear me? And they said, we can hear you. And I said, I can hear you. Can you hear me? And we went back and forth, and all of a sudden they got so excited because we made this connection. And they told me that they had been waiting a long time to be making this connection with me. Apparently, they had been with me since I was a young boy, and that I had a particular destiny with them. And there's no guarantee that a human's going to be able to make a connection with their angelic guides and have that kind of telepathic rapport communication, but I did, and I developed it. And all of a sudden we had this circuit of communication. And they told me a lot of things about my own personal journey, my own soul's journey through many lifetimes. But then they told me that my mission, which I had been asking to be revealed to me, because when I was in the canyons, and I would walk the canyons by myself, and I would just pray to the Great Spirit. I was really into the Native American thing at the time. And I was learning about the medicine wheel and the 4 directions and what they call the beauty path in Navajo. And so I was walking the beauty path, and I was learning how to work in harmony with all the elements, with all the directions and all the beings in the medicine wheel, the spirits, and the different elements, and to walk in harmony with it. And I was asking that my mission would be revealed to me. Well, when I connected with the angels, they told me that my mission, which I had been asking to be revealed to me, the angels delivered the message to me, because they're messengers. And they said that your mission is to be a channel for the heavenly music. Because when I was with them, and I was in these other realms, the music was just like so extraordinary. There was this most heavenly music, symphonic music, that would just roll on in cascades, harmonious cascades of unending melodies, like an unchained melody that would never end. I would just reverberate into eternity. It was so beautiful that at times I would be moved to tears, actually. And as I would tune into it, my whole body would begin to vibrate and shake, and tears spontaneously would start to form in my eyes, and my eyes would just start to water uncontrollably. It was such a high frequency energy. Now, leading up to this point, what I learned later, there was a reason why I had to do all the preparatory work. Because to tap into that kind of energy, if you're not prepared, the nervous system is like, plugging into high voltage, high current. And if you're not prepared, it can be very damaging to the psyche. Hence, we have a lot of people that have had a spiritual emergence or a transcendent experience, and they're in mental institutions because they weren't able to handle it. I think a lot of people there have had mystical experiences and didn't quite know how to handle it. But for me, it was more of a gentle way that I was brought into it. Simultaneous to that, it was, as I was doing my yoga and meditation, there was really a Kundalini awakening that happened. So my whole nervous system, my whole energetic system was going through a new level of refinement and recalibration as I was working with these light beings, these angelic beings. But they told me that my mission was to be a channel for the heavenly music which I was hearing. And they told me that the instrument that I was to play was the harp. And I was like, harp, come on. I said, I want an electric guitar. And they were like, no, sorry, that's another lifetime. They said, this lifetime, you're going to play the harp, if you choose to do it with us. Because I had a choice. Of course, there's free will. And at first, I kind of balked at it. I was like, I was 32. I wasn't really a musician. I played my Native American flute. I knew a few chords on the guitar. As I was telling people earlier, I played the piano spontaneously by ear as a young child at 6 years old, but stopped doing that when somebody told me I was doing it wrong and would have to learn properly. Yeah. And then when the music of the harp came through, then it was like I picked up where I left off, where I was a child. But anyway, eventually, the angels were so steadfast with their heavenly request that I just surrendered to it. It was just obvious that this was what I was to do. And they told me that they were going to channel this music through me, that they would teach me how to play. And that this music would have within it a very special frequency that would remind people of home. And that it would be like a clarion call, calling people back into the love, back into the light. And they said that because of the times we're living in, that there is an extraordinary planetary transformation occurring of consciousness for the whole human race. That there is actually an increasing of the frequency on the planet, and that humans are getting ready collectively to move into a whole new state of consciousness. We're on the verge of tapping in collectively into the quantum field. Mm-hmm. Yeah? So I was like, yeah, I want to be a part of that, because I knew I was a light worker for a long time before this, like many of you here, perhaps. I knew that I was here to be of service to this great transformation. And it had taken different forms. I knew this from the days I was working with John Denver and doing a lot of that work. And I had different activations on my mission. But this was really kind of the climax of it, when the angels came. And they told me that the music that they were giving me had within it a specific frequency, and that working with them, that this music would go out all over the world, and it would touch the hearts and souls of thousands of people around the world, and that it would remind them of home, and it would heal them, it would heal their heart, it would help them to release sorrow and grief on a soul level. Yeah. And they also told me that that people could use this music to meditate with, and that they could soul travel on the music. Now at first, they told me this before I even had the harp. But I said I would do it. And when they told me all that stuff, it seemed kind of far-fetched to me. But I just went along with it. And as soon as I said I would play the harp with them, about a week later, I met a woman in Sedona who, as it turned out, was an accomplished harpist. And I told her that I was feeling drawn to the instrument. She said, well, I just happen to have a small harp at my house for sale. Why don't you come and try it? So I did. I went to her house, and I sat down at a little harp about the size of this one. And as soon as I got my hands on it, I could feel the energy wanting to come through. And I could hear all the angels around me go, this is it, get the harp, get the harp. So I ended up getting the harp. And I was leaving her house out in the country of Sedona. I was driving on a dirt road. She had a long driveway out in country dirt. And it was just after nightfall. And I was in my van. I had my new harp with me. And I was driving. All of a sudden, an owl flew down right in front of my car, about 10, 20 feet in front of my car, and flew with me in the headlights for a moment or two, and then flew up and stopped, flew up to, and landed on a branch in a tree up ahead. I stopped the car, and I just looked up, and it was sitting and looking right at me. And I was into the owl. It was like one of my totem animals in the Native American thing. And I just took that as a very distinct sign. This was a sign. This was right. And then it flew off. And I continued on. I slept in the canyons that night. And the next day, I came back for my first harp lesson. And as I was in the afternoon, and as I drove down, I stopped at the same spot where I saw the owl. My inner voice said, "Get out of the car." And I got out of the car, and I looked around. All of a sudden, I looked right down on the ground, and there was an owl feather stuck to a weed right at my feet. And it was just another sign that the owl. And the owl is about death and transcendence and seeing in the dark. And this is what I was doing because I was, we were doing all these sensory deprived shamanic journeys. So we were really calling on a lot of the owl medicine to be our guide as we would fly through these other realms. So anyway, I got the harp and I retreated back into the canyons with it. And I could carry it over my shoulder. It had a little carrying case, and I could sling it over my shoulder and hike out into the wilderness, and I would find a power spot, like Carlos Don Juan would say, and I would just feel my way and feel the resonance at different places until I found the right spot. Then I would sit and I would take my magic harp out of its case, and then I would just start strumming the strings. And all of a sudden, the wind would start to swirl around me, and the birds would start singing, and all the animals would come out, and what is the sound? And it was like very elemental, very magical, because the harp is a very magical instrument, of course, throughout mythology and throughout all sorts of traditions around the world. And as I put my hands on the strings, I could feel this energy coming through me, where it started to move my hands by themselves. And it was, at first it was terrifying. It was such a very strong and powerful force. And as I would do this, there would be so much heat that would come through my body that I would just break out in profusely sweating. And my hands would be shaking like this. And my eyes would be just watering profusely, where I could barely even see. I had to keep squinting to squeeze the water out of my eyes. I was like, wow, what is going on here? What I discovered later on was that one angel in particular became my personal harp teacher, where this angelic being would overshadow me, would merge with my energy field and send its impulses through my nervous system. And then it would be translated to my fingers. And then as I got more comfortable with this type of experience, eventually what happened was this angelic being would completely come into my body, where I would go into a trance, and I would just come into me and would play through me. And within a matter of 2 or 3 weeks, I started to have distinct songs and melodies, and structure started coming to the music. And to make a long story short, after 10 months of this, well, actually after 6 months, I'll just tell you this little part. After 6 months, I got a message from the angels, and they said, prepare to go on another journey. They said, we want you to go to Australia. And at the time, I didn't have any money. I'm like, you want me to go to Australia? Why? Like, what's going on? Well, as fate would have it, a relative gave me a gift shortly thereafter of some money. And I was able to buy a plane ticket to Australia. So I packed my backpack, I put my harp in storage, I packed my backpack and took my little harp, not knowing a soul in Australia. But I had a destination in mind, Byron Bay in New South Wales, which is like the Sedona of Australia. So I always wanted to go there, so I'm going to go there. And I was being guided by the angels who were whispering continuously in my ear and guiding me on this journey. Well, within about 4 or 5 days of being there in Byron Bay, I ended up getting a room in a house which is owned by the drummer of Dire Straits. And at the time, there was a woman renting who was an astrologer, and she gave me the top room. From my bed, I could look out a window and I could look down at the beach and watch the dolphins swim by in this Wategos Bay, in Byron Bay. And out the other window was the lighthouse on Cape Byron, which is the brightest light in the southern hemisphere. And it's also, Byron Bay is the easternmost point of Australia, where to the Aborigines it's known as the place of the lizard dreaming. You know? So I started having these strange dreams there as I would sleep in the house. I'd wake up in the middle of the night and kind of a lucid dreaming, and I'd see lizards crawling on the railing by the stairs in my room. Very strange. You know, the ketamine really opened me up to all these other dimensions. And it got to the point where the veil between the two was very thin, and I was able to cross back and forth at will, almost. But anyway, I'd been in Byron Bay about a week, and I walked into a health food store there, a little cafe, and I looked up on the bulletin board, and there was a advertisement for a recording studio. It had little angels playing harps. It said, recording studio for hire. And the angel said, you got to connect with this guy. So I called him up and I went in there, and he recorded my first little harp melodies and added some nice sounds behind it, like some keyboard sounds and flute sounds. And I made my first little demo tape. And after 3 days, I walked out on the beach with my cassette, my Walkman, and I sat down on the beach. And I looked out at the ocean with that golden shimmery light on the water. I put on my headphones and listened to this music. And it was very reminiscent of the music that I had heard in the canyons, because he put some orchestral strings behind it. All of a sudden it just blossomed and came to life, to my amazement. And I was just so overwhelmed with this rapturous feeling of just amazement of what we had just created. I closed my eyes. I actually was looking into the golden light, the shimmering, and I went into the golden light. All of a sudden I was taken out of my body and I was taken up into another dimension. And there I saw a movie screen that I looked at. And the angels told me, they said, we're going to show you future events of your life if you continue on this journey with us. And there I saw, they showed me that I was going to return to the States, that I was going to record a professional album, that I was going to be a harpist and tour all over the place, and they actually showed me a finished CD in a catalog with other music. And I was like, wow, that's pretty amazing. So I came back from that vision, and immediately I made my plans to return to the States. I actually, when I went on that trip, I said goodbye to everybody for a year. I got a year's visa. I thought I'd maybe be in Australia for a year. I'd only been there for 2 weeks. And they're saying, go back already. So I told goodbye to my parents for a year, all my friends. And I ended up back in Sedona 3 weeks later. And so when I came back, I got a bigger harp, a more professional harp with a nicer tone. And after about a month of learning how to play that, the angel said, you're ready, so let's go into the studio and record. I had been playing the harp for about, 10 months at this point. And I went into the studio, I said a prayer, we lit some candles, I called in the angels, and I sat down at the harp. The guy pressed the record button, and for an hour I just channeled this music. My hands just moved on the strings by themselves. And for the next month, we did some other orchestration, some other musicians came in and laid some other tracks on it. And when it was done, I asked the angels, what are we going to call this music? And they said, it's called harp magic. Harp magic. And that really rang true for me, because it was a magical thing with the harp that was occurring. And when it was done, I made 50 copies of my cassette tape, and each one I colored by hand. And I made each one a unique work. And I started giving it out to people around Sedona. And people were like, wow, this is the most beautiful music I've ever heard. I said, people have to hear this music. And I gave it to a couple of the bookstores, and the bookstores were like, yeah, we'd like to sell this music for you. And I was like, cool, because I was kind of a hippie living in my van. I didn't have much money, and I was like, all of a sudden I could see how this could really work. Well, I didn't know anything about promotion or marketing music, so I asked the angels, I said, please send me some help. If you want this music to go out in the world, please send me some help. And within a week, I got a phone call. I happened to be house sitting at a friend's house, and they tracked me down somehow. And on the other end of the phone was some record. I said, well, I think my friend's just getting ready to go to Sedona. So he put me on the phone with this guy, and he said he's got a vacant house in Sedona, and he's looking for somebody to live in it. And I didn't really have any money at the time. And we talked, and everything sounded good, and when we finally got cut to the chase, he said, well, how much can you pay for rent? I said, how much is it going to cost? He said, how much can you pay? And I said, well, I can pay $300 a month. And he said, okay. And he gave me a 1,500 square foot house for $300 a month in the outskirts of town. That was just how the angels, they take care of you. And so I ended up moving there, and I lived in that house for 5 years, and at $300 a month. It was a real gift. I'm real grateful for that. But it was also during that time, after I arrived in Sedona, I got invited to go to Las Vegas to perform at a Whole Life Expo in Vegas. And I didn't have much money to make the trip. And I was telling the angels, I don't know, I don't think I can make this trip. I really don't have the resources. But the angels were like, you gotta go to this show. They kept banging in my head, you gotta go to this show, you're gonna meet somebody who's very important to help you right now. And I was like, I finally surrendered. I said, okay, and I asked somebody else to go with me. We carpooled and we shared expenses. We got a hotel room, we all shared it. And I was playing there. It was a Friday, Saturday, Sunday. And you know, the angel said I was going to meet somebody very important. It was Sunday afternoon. I hadn't met anybody important. And I was going, angels, come on. I came all the way here, and the show was kind of a flop. I hardly sold any CDs, and I could barely cover my expenses. All of a sudden, at the 11th hour, the producer of the show walks over to me and goes, hey, would you like to open for Doreen Virtue? And I was like, sure. He said, she does something with the angels. I was like, oh, okay, that sounds like a good match. I didn't know who she was. And I walked into her lecture hall. She had about 60 people in there, and she was just getting ready to speak. And when she saw me walk into the door, she stood up and she goes, Peter Sterlilng. And I was like, yeah. She goes, you're my favorite musician. And I was like, wow, really? And she brought me right up, and we went right into a guided meditation. She turned out, what she said, she told the group the story. She said that she had bought one of my CDs about 2 years prior at an expo in LA, where I was playing in the lobby. And she took it home, and she just loved Heart Magic, the name of the CD. And she would listen to it while she would write her books. Specifically a book called Angel Therapy, which is a pink book. I don't know if you've seen it, but it was her first channeled book of angel messages. And she wrote it in about 1 week. And the whole time she was writing it, she was listening to my music over and over. Her son put it into a computer so it could play over and over. And she said that it had the right frequency in it where it helped her to get a direct link up with her angels. And so from that point on, she invited me to go on tour with her. And I went all over the country playing music at her workshops and seminars. And she introduced me to thousands of people. And my career just skyrocketed after that. And she's written about me in 2 of her books about my music and her experiences with me. So, yeah. So, it's been an amazing journey. I'd like to show you a few pictures now. Is that all right?
Sure.
Are there any questions right now? We only got about 20 more minutes left, I guess. Time flies.
Could you play some music?
You want to hear a little music again? Okay, I'll do that, and then I'll show you some pictures.
I'll play you a song from my new CD. It's called Silhouette. And this is a song called Blessed Be.
experience with my computer here today, so let me see if I can get it to function properly for us. This is a picture of Boynton Canyon. This is where I spent a lot of time. This is one of my sacred power spots. This is back in the canyon up on top of one of these rock spires that you can climb way up into and sit and take in the view. It's a very powerful place. It was here around my birthday, shortly after I got the harp, where I climbed to the top of one of these plateaus like I'm on here with my little harp, and I held it to the sky. And I told the angel, I said, I know you're with me and I know what I'm here to do, and I offered myself up in humble service to the divine, the source of all light and love in the universe. And I said, use me. I'm here to serve. I offer myself up to be a vessel for the sacred music, for the heavenly music to come through. And when I did that, I sat down and it was like, the energy came in much, much stronger, because the angels were waiting for me to give them full permission for them to work. They'll never do that unless you invite them in. They'll never override your personal. So that's where a lot happened for me. Another picture, another one of my favorite spots, looking at the crimson cliffs, which reflect the sunset on the white limestone. It's interesting to note that there's a bell rock. It's interesting to note that the reason the rocks are red is because of the high iron content, and they've oxidized. And we have a very high iron content in our blood. So when you harmonize with the rocks, that there can be a communication that can happen. Iron holds the memory. Iron is what holds music to cassette tape or video. It's iron oxide. Iron holds the memory in floppy disk of a computer. It's iron. So here in Sedona, you can go back 350 million years in geologic time through all the layers. And if you harmonize with the red rocks and talk to them and attune yourself to them, you can get visions, and they'll communicate to you the history of the earth, all the ancient history, and you can get a feeling for what that's like. It's very moving. Here's one of my stained glass windows. A few pictures of them. Intuitively, I started doing stained glass when I was 6 years old, around the same time I was doing the piano music. My mother took me into the Episcopal church service instead of Sunday school. It was around Easter at All Saints Church in Southern California, and I went into the church service and sat between her and her best friend instead of going with the rest of the kids for Sunday school. For some reason, my mother felt she wanted to bring me in to see the service for the first time. And immediately I was spellbound by the ritual, by the priests in their beautiful colored vestments and the holy water and the words and the Latin and all that, and the choir. And there were these beautiful stained glass windows that were in the church. And as I was sitting during the progression of the church service, all of a sudden the sun moved to where beams of colored light were shining in to the church. And I was really touched by that. My young heart and soul was touched by the beauty of the colored light coming in. And I actually traveled up through the light and kind of went out. And this is what they put stained glass windows in churches for, was a window to the heavens. And so I really went out on that colored beam of light. And I looked up at my mother when I came back, and I said, when I grow up, I want to be a stained glass window maker. And she kind of patted me on the shoulder, said, that's nice. And then I didn't think anything about it. And about 10 years later, I was in high school. I was looking for a part-time job. I went into the career counseling center on the campus, and I looked up on the board with all the 3x5 cards. And there was a card that said, stained glass studio needs helper. And all of a sudden, my memory of being 6 years old came back to me. And I was like, oh my God. And I called the number, I went for an interview, I got the job, and I became an apprentice to a master stained glass craftsman, which taught me the art of stained glass. I developed a very unique style of stained glass from the very beginning, where I would inlay crystals and gemstones into the design. So this one has amethyst and clear quartz cabochons around the center, which is open with a pale amethyst at the bottom, and then three other quartz points around it. This I call the rosy cross. Notice it makes kind of a cross. This one has 4 quartz pyramids around a star-shaped, 6-sided ametrine on the center. This one's about this big, far across, with the quartz crystals around an Austrian leaded crystal faceted in the center. So when the sun hits it, it sends out those rainbows of light from the center of it. That's a close-up of the center. Sacred geometries, which I intuitively knew, have energy. They have a frequency to them. And this is a copper foil technique. So the whole grid of the window is connected in copper with the quartz crystals are amplifiers of the energy. So I learned about the mandalas of Asia, and how in Tibet and in India, the yantras, and how you can meditate on them and they affect consciousness. I was very much into that, still am. So these windows all hang in private collection healing centers around the country. Then I started making these dream stones. All of a sudden, I didn't have a stained glass studio. This is the dark period of when I was in Ojai. And I didn't have a stained glass studio, but I still wanted to work with the color. And I got this idea to paint on rocks. And they were very primitive at first, but then as they evolved over time, these beautiful patterns started to come out. And I discovered that there were angels in the designs of these dream stones.
Mm-hmm.
You can see them in there, like 4 angels flying into the center, flying into the light. It's like angels in the architecture. You ever heard that term? It's like once you connect with the angels and start working, everything that expresses through you has angelic imprints. It's kind of a 4-direction southwest. Then I found this painting by Gustave Doré, which illustrated my experience of when I was taken out, saw the radiant sphere of light, and then eventually I saw all the legions of angels around it, and they were all singing praises, rapturous, ecstatic praises to the divine, to the source of all light and love. This is what the angels told me. After I had this experience, some years later, I found this painting. Doré is a famous artist who illustrated Dante's Paradiso. There's another one. It's very much like I experienced here. And the cherubs, when I first met them, they looked very much like this. It was almost like a virtual reality. It was so strange, but they were very much like this. Very little chubby babies like that. Eventually I saw some seraphim, and even Archangel Michael I've had some encounters with. Here I am on the boat. Every year now I go to the Bahamas with the harp, and we swim with the dolphins. And this is the wind harp playing here. Just letting the wind blow through it creates the most beautiful heavenly sound, and it calls the dolphins to the boat.
Wow.
And we get in the water and we swim with them.
Mm-hmm.
Here we're doing this is Mirabai Devi. She's like a spiritual teacher, and she does a Shaktipat initiation where she zaps your third eye with the light. And we would float people in the water. We'd swim with dolphins in the day, and then in the late afternoon or in the early morning we'd do these darshans as I would serenade. Here I am in the sequoias playing for the great sequoia trees.
Mm.
This is in Egypt. This is in the Temple of Isis. I went to Egypt a few years back and was able to play my harp in all the temples. This was sunrise at the Temple of Isis in Philae. You can see there's a harpist engraved. The harpist was held in the highest regard in ancient Egypt. Only the highest initiates in the mystery schools of Egypt would play the harp in the temples. Here I am touched by the light. This is in the Hathor temple in Gandhara, the morning light streaming in. And this is at the Horus temple. We did a beautiful nighttime ceremony, Edfu, the Horus temple. This is in Luxor, and you can see the orbs around. Always a lot of orbs. It's an orb storm. It's a whiteout of orbs. That's at Edfu again. A couple orbs behind me. There's one of my concerts in Ojai. You can see the orbs with us. Another different concert in Ojai.
Can you tell us what are the orbs?
What are they? There's some sort of spiritual energy. Perhaps they're angels. People have all sorts of different experiences with them. I'm always calling in the angels. It's an angel invocation when I do my performances. And I ask the angels to touch and work with everybody. So if there's anybody in the audience, like they're here with us right now. If somebody has a camera right now, you take some pictures with a flash, you pick up some orbs, I guarantee it. But I always ask them at my concerts we invite them in to come and work with each individual. So they will touch you and work with you if there's some sort of healing you need on any level. Yes?
Are you able to call the angels at will?
Yes.
Now so today, tomorrow, when you wake up, you can call them?
Yes, I can.
Okay.
Yeah, sure.
Is there a special signal or a way you talk to them?
Yeah. I think it's quite simple. They respond to love. So you just get into your heart, you call them with all your heart and soul, and the love in your heart. As you know, you spoke earlier, that's why people respond to you when you smile at people, because you're giving them the love. That's really what they respond to. So it's on that harmonic frequency of love that they respond. Just like the dolphins, when we go out and we do a group meditation, we all send forth our love to the dolphins and call them in, and they come to the boat. So it's the same. The higher beings resonate at love, especially when you start getting in the higher dimensions, into the fifth dimension, into the unified field, into the oneness. It's about love. Love is the unifying principle of the higher planes. You cannot make your ascension just by it's not a mental process. It's a process of opening the heart into the higher octaves of the heart, the higher heart, which is that truly compassionate, unconditional love. It's a challenge for us to get there sometimes, because we all have a lot of wounds, a lot of programming, and a lot of fear that we're holding on to. So you have to transcend your fears and open your heart.
One question, please.
This is in Glastonbury, England. Was there last year. I'll be taking a group in July. You're all invited to come if you ever wanted to go to England and see the sacred sites. We have special visits to all the sacred sites. We do beautiful ceremonies.
And is it the Glastonbury Festival of Crossover?
Yes, I was.
Oh my God, I was there.
Last July or last August. Yeah, I was there. Yeah, this picture here is on the tour, and that's the Tower of St. Michael's. It's the old church, and just the tower remains. It's dedicated to Archangel Michael. And this is inside, playing inside the tower. This is at Avebury. This is the largest stone circle in the world, or of all of England, in British Isles. This is Stonehenge. Sunrise ceremony at Stonehenge. I have my druid cape on there. We all dress up like druids when we do these beautiful ceremonies. This is in the crop circles. The wind harp in the crop circles. This is the Milk Hill Formation, which is one that appeared over 3 days, a very complex circle. That's it, going out behind me there.
Where is that?
This is in England, in Wiltshire, England. And we'll be going there to the crop circles again. The crop circles are amazing. Does everybody know about the crop circles?
Yeah.
Yeah, they appear overnight, kind of instantaneously. Last year there were 85 crop circles in over a 4-month period, all in the Wiltshire area.
Did you see UFOs?
I didn't see any particular that time, but I have seen UFOs. Yeah.
How do they look like?
How did they look? They looked like a craft, lights and then also craft, the actual ships.
Not the...
The people, the beings? Well, that's a whole nother story. See, we're going to get involved in the story. I've had some recent experiences that were really powerful. But they came to me because they're very basically what's getting ready to happen is we're getting ready to make contact here, mass contact for the whole human race. The human race is getting ready to graduate. We've been living in isolation.
Yeah.
We don't even know where we came from.
Right.
We have old books and myths that kind of tell us. We have no direct proof of who we are, where we came from, or who created us. But now, you know, because we live in the third dimension, which is dualistic, it's a polarity reality, which is, in our reality on this earth, it's characterized primarily by fear. This is not a world of love, generally speaking. Love is the underdog here, yeah? So we're getting ready to graduate and go to the next level for those who want to. And, but you have to do the work. You have to raise your vibration. You have to raise your frequency. It's very important. You have to do the work.
What have you said for the year 2012?
Yeah, well, that's what they're getting us ready for, because all the galactic alignments that are going to occur, and we're being flooded with high frequency light energy coming from the higher planes, the higher dimensions, and it's coming from our sun. You know, we're in the sun, the new solar cycle now, cycle 24, which scientists are saying will be the most intense solar flare cycle, sunspot cycle that we're going to see, since they've been keeping records of the sunspots for 300 years. And the scientists are very concerned. This solar cycle peaks at 2012, very coincidentally. The crossing over of 2012 to 2013, the end of the Mayan calendar is December 21st, 2012, and that's right at the peak of the sunspot cycle. We've been having extraordinary coronal mass ejections and solar flares in the last few weeks. I don't know if you watch the sun, but it's very important. And the sun is actually broadcasting. It's giving us the light, you know. But the powers that be would make us all be afraid of the sun. So keep your sunglasses on, slather on, sunblock. Don't stay away from the sun. It's going to harm you. I mean, this is a lie. It is a lie. If anything is going to harm you, it's putting on the sunscreen too much, because that stuff is toxic. Being under artificial light. This is a whole other thing we could really get into it. But if you want to watch the sun, go to spaceweather.com, and you can watch the sun. There's a new telescope that has just come online in the last few weeks, and they're getting the most extraordinary images of the sun now that we've never been able to see. You get to see these huge prominences in solar flares just exploding off the surface of the sun like you've never seen before. It'll blow your mind when you see it. Go to spaceweather.com. Okay, here we are doing a harp healing in the crop circle with the wind harp. It's a beautiful high frequency tone, very penetrating. Laying the harp right on the body so the vibrations from the wood go right in. This is the pinwheel circle that I was able to go into. You can see a group of people in the center of it there. They're massive, massive. And these circles here are perfectly in the phi ratio or golden mean proportion, which our own body is a reflection of.
Who's creating them?
The extraterrestrials are creating them. They would like us to think that they're made by two drunken Englishmen with boards on them. But there's no way. I mean, they're so precise. Look at the precision in that.
Right.
Why Wiltshire?
Huh?
Why Wiltshire? Why that?
Why Wiltshire? You know, nobody really knows, but there's already, you know, there's all the Neolithic sacred sites there, and there's a large audience of people already there, so it's a great theater for this to happen.
What's the message?
Ascension, prepare for the dimensional shift, which is coming, 2012.
So that's the crop circle mention?
Yes.
Uh-huh.
And they're also teaching us about hypergeometries and also astronomical events like asteroids, comets, eclipses, different alignments within the galaxy. This is the pinwheel, and this is inside the pinwheel. We went at sunset with a few friends. This was about 3 days after it appeared.
Fields of wheat?
Fields of barley. And when they take the barley seed from a crop circle and plant it in the ground with the seed from outside the circle, the crop circle seed grows about 5 times as tall. They're doing all sorts of scientific research. Yeah, there's a strong energy field in the crop circles.
Is it healing people?
Very healing. Yeah, very healing. This is at the Chalice Well at the bottom of the tour. And on my Druid Cape again. We do a beautiful ceremony there. This is in Peru, over New Year's. This is in the Sacred Valley, all the sacred sites of Peru. That's the Sacred Valley below on our way to Machu Picchu. Playing the wind harp and saying a prayer to the Apus, which are the mountain spirits. Just a few more shots here. And I'm playing my flute. This is over the town of Urabamba. This is where the flood was recently. Remember the flooding in Peru? That's the river. This flooding happened. That was all flooded about a week after I left. And a lot of damage there. This is interesting too on the right. You can see on the right, see the three curved lines? It looks like two breasts.
Yeah.
That is what the farmers who plant that field, that actually is two breasts, which represents Pachamama, the Earth Mother. And they actually carve her right into their fields. This is on an island in Lake Titicaca. And this is the woman who took us. This is the before picture. Here's the after picture. You can see the orb. I'm getting goosed by an orb. Pretty dramatic. I mean, look at that again. No orb, all of a sudden. Okay, here's another one. We stayed on the island overnight, and we stayed with a family of indigenous Quechua Indians who were very poor, but very sweet people, and they took care of us for the night. This was as we were leaving. I was playing them a song. This is the before picture. Here's the after picture. There's a real angel here, or some sort of spirit appeared on the film. You can kind of see it. It looks like wings and a head, and kind of almost looks like a mermaid tail now. It's quite dramatic. And this was 2 weeks ago in Sedona with my new blue harp. And with the crystal balls, I do a lot of work with the crystal balls as well. These are the alchemy balls, the real refined ones.
And what is the experience?
Pardon?
What do you experience with that?
Well, the crystal balls are another high frequency energy. So the crystal balls are a tool that we can use to attune ourselves to the higher frequencies. So, very helpful. There's our friend Archangel Michael, our guardian. And here's an angel in the clouds of Sedona. And that's the last picture. Are there any questions? I did take the picture. So thank you very much for listening. It's been an honor to be here.
So glad you could come. Don't forget, next month we have Betty Estelle, an 83-year-old healer who healed herself from cancer, terminal cancer. And she's an incredible lady, and don't want to miss her.